that, Chip?
Well, it took about a year for the investigative reporters who started looking into this and their legal departments to be satisfied with my credentials.
You're talking about the article in Nexus.
That's correct. And not only there, I just went through a federal trial, and in the Classified Information Procedures hearing, there was no doubt, there was no, there's no way that my credentials could be, or that the government could deny them, because they're factual. I was for 25 years with them. Can't be denied. The reason that I'm not, that I'm in pretty safe ground, Pete, is simply because I've been around long enough to know that you need to keep an ace in the hole. I have that ace in the hole. I've promised the people in very high places that ace in the hole will keep them protected as long as I'm protected.
And by the way, Pete, the information that he has furnished to me cross-checks with other individuals who have been involved in these same type activities, and with whom I am personally involved, not as an agent or anything, but in the form of obtaining information from them. So Chip has been checked from A to Z and up and down all directions, and there's no question about this man's credibility.
Okay. One other quick question. What does your guest think of the current administration and Chinese communist scandals, fundraising and so forth?
Yeah, I have that.
I'm probably gonna hang up here and I'll just listen then.
Okay, I was going to get into that. Not necessarily this hour. We have these 5 shows, concluding the show today, plus the 6th one we had on the 23rd of April.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the areas I was going to get into. But as long as you've asked the question, let's get into it right now. Go ahead, Chip.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pete.
As a prisoner of war in Cambodia, some of the teams that were assigned to interrogate us included Chinese officers. I watched in horror as a 19-year-old boy as a Chinese major skinned our captain alive and crucified him because he found a St. Christopher's cross on his neck. Bayonets were held, knives were held to our heads, requiring us to watch this. I watched our platoon leader suffer over days and die.
Tortured?
Tortured by a Chinese officer. My feeling about any administration that would go into contracts with the Chinese, do I need to say it?
You were also tortured by a Chinese officer.
Yes, I was.
And you want to tell us about that?
Well, I was beaten. When the captain was killed and skinned alive, I had, in one of our escape attempts, I had hurt the Chinese officer. So in my escape attempt, when we were recaptured, my nose was broken during one of the beatings, and the medical officer took the skin of our dead captain and stuffed it up my nose. And he told me that as I breathed, I would taste and smell of death.
Skinning alive is a practice that's also used by the Satanists, Satanic movement in this country and around the world, I guess. I don't want to go into details. In the ones I've heard about, they started with the toe and the foot. Is that right?
That's right. And yeah, any of the appendages.
Yeah, and then they move on up. Tragic, horrible death, terrible thing.
Suffered by one of America's heroes.
Beg your pardon?
Suffered by one of America's true heroes, that young Captain Special Forces officer.
Yes, and we have many heroes out there, Chip, and that's what perturbs me about the CIA drug operation and killing of innocent people, assassinations by the CIA. And we have people like Henry Hyde of Chicago, congressman from Chicago, keeping a record of the black ops by this agency. And we have people in Washington, D.C. giving orders out to do this and do that that are not in our best interest or the best interests of our country. And we have this phony Bill Clinton talking about worried about tobacco, our youth is smoking tobacco, and he, time for a quick break. We'll be right back, folks. I thought I was on a roll, but I'll get back to it. And we're back. My guest today is Chip Tatum, 25-year veteran of the CIA. I was on a roll, Chip, and the music came along, and what I was saying was that Bill Clinton is making a big issue out of our youth smoking cigarettes, and it is a problem. I'll have to agree to that. But at the same time, he sanctions and allows drugs to be brought in by the ton load into this country today, and that could be stopped overnight if he took certain precautions. But there are too many politicians involved. Too many of them have been compromised through drugs and sex, and there are too many bureaucrats involved now. There's no question in my mind that we have been infiltrated, this country at all levels of the government, big time. How do you feel about that, Chip?
I think you're dead on, Ted.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that you're dead on that.
Oh, I know I am. Chip, I was going to get into another area. Let's talk about in the first hour we talked about Henry Hyde and how he keeps track of black ops by the CIA and the drugs and so forth. Tell us about Iran-Contra. You were obviously involved in it, and you have information about Ollie North, and you have information about other leading figures in this country. When did you first realize what was going on? When you dropped that medical box and it was split open and there was cocaine in it?
Well, in that arena, yes, that's when I first knew. I had no doubt what was going on. When I landed and made my call back to Washington Switch and told Mr. North what was going on, and his response was that these are the fruits of war. They're going to world courts. You know, we're going to get the Sandinistas for doing this, for shipping drugs into our country. Well, you know, that's the apple pie response, you know, but when it comes right down to it, Mr. North doesn't know the meaning of Semper Fidelis. Let me read one of the items that I wrote on the back of one of the flight plans when I landed, simply because I knew that we needed to start documenting what was going on for the protection of my flight crews. These men were military men. They weren't agency. They weren't intelligence assets of any sort. They were innocent bystanders, like you have talked about, that we were utilizing. We needed the cover of medevac to fly the missions under humanitarian support.
Explain medevac.
Medical evacuation is just that, medical evacuation of wounded and supplies via helicopters. We flew OD green helicopters with big red crosses on them, so that under the Geneva Convention we wouldn't be fired upon, and we were a humanitarian aircraft. We weren't to supply any weapons. We weren't to supply anything other than humanitarian support in medevac aircraft. Well,
now you had markings on those planes and also on the black helicopters flown in the past. It was painted. The helicopters are black, and the painting on the helicopter was U.S. Army, also in black. So they were able to comply with all the regulations that way. Keep going.
That's correct. But the medevac aircraft, it was an actual medevac group that received the tasking to go in there. We knew ahead of time who would be tasked to go TDY in there, and I was sent to that unit to PCS, Permanent Change of Station, to infiltrate that unit so that I could be the command pilot on that mission.
Okay.
When I landed, I made notes. And let me.
Where did you land, Chip?
Pardon me?
Where did you land?
Back at Pomerol Air Base. That's in Honduras. That was the Air Force Academy of the Hondurans, and that's where we were basing out of. On 9th of April, we landed, and this is what was written. We flew into a small village 40 kilometers east-northeast of Acatal in Nicaragua. Rodriguez was there with the Contra leader, Enrique Bermudez, when we arrived. We walked through the camp, which was still being cleared and organized. 4 fuel pods, with their tops cut off, were sitting outside a large military tent. Several tactical fuel balls were located next to the pods. Rodriguez told the aircrew that this was a Sandinista base that was captured. I noted that all the equipment, the GP large tent, the fuel pods, and the tactical fuel balls were U.S. made. And inside the tent were several women packaging cocaine. When we left, we carried 410-quart white coolers marked medical supplies to San Lorenzo, Honduras, dropped them off to a civilian C-123, and returned to base.
This is written on your flight plan?
In 1985.
On the back of your flight plan?
On the back of the flight plan.
How many such reports do you have?
There's 110 pages of this.
Okay, so that's your documentation.
And it's pretty darn good documentation.
That's the best. And what have you done with this documentation?
I've published it.
I was told you gave it to Janet Reno?
Janet Reno has a copy of it. As a matter of fact, I even sent it to a man named Lee Reddick, who's in charge of the Public Integrity Section of the Department of Justice. And Mr. Reddick's response was unbelievable. He said, let me read his response when he received this. This office is responsible for investigation and prosecution of public officials. We regret we cannot assist you in this matter.
Time for a quick break. Be right back, folks. And we're back. My guest today is Chip Tatum, 25-year CIA deep cover agent. Chip, on this, we were talking about Ollie North. Tell us more about Ollie North. And now you had direct contact with him, didn't you?
Oh, blood and guts himself, you bet. That's what he likes to refer to himself as.
Well, is he really a blood and guts man, or is that all a front?
I think that's quite a bit of front. I think he was a warrior. He was placed in a position that greed got the best of him. However, his Vietnam days, he was a warrior. Those are gone, and he can never relive those days as much as he would like to. I know that on one occasion in one of the camps, let me read you what my medic wrote. This is on 18th of March. He said, arrived at San Lorenzo, arrival had not been coordinated with ground personnel. At the helipad, the emergency vehicles were not waiting. There was no answer on medevac frequency 4510 or on their 4910. Confusion on ground causing ground time 15 minutes. Medic's duties were compounded when Mr. North fainted. Our medic was working on the chest of a particular Contra soldier. We had 2 wounded Contra soldiers in the camp that we went into in El Paraiso because of artillery fire during the night, and many wounded children. When we saw that there was a piece of wood, a sliver, in the chest of this man, we tore his clothing open. Mr. North wanted to leave. He had other villages to get to, but we were the primary medevac for 3 countries also. I had 3 jobs. We worked for the CIA out of the embassy, I worked for Pegasus Group, and I worked for the Army as a medevac pilot. So I was juggling quite a bit. When North came over to see what the delay was, and he asked Specialist McDonald, my medic, McDonald looked up at him kind of disgusted, trying to explain to him that he had to work on this man to save his life. Then we tore the clothing open, and the chest wound was wide, the chest cavity was wide open, and McDonald grabbed in to pull the wood out that was laying on top of the heart area, and North's knees buckled and fell over.
Well, how was he involved in the Iran-Contra situation as far as the money was concerned, and the organization of it?
Well, North is the person who actually, you hear a lot about the North camps in Honduras for the Contras. The North camps were named the North camps not because they were necessarily in the northern part of the country, but because North set them up. North was in charge of setting those camps up. Enrique Bermudez was in charge of protecting those camps, and Ramon Navarro was in charge of the cocaine operations in those camps. It was the 3 musketeers there. They were producing out of each camp and there were 5 of them that were producing cocaine, about 500 kilos a week. It wasn't a large operation, but it was large enough that the paste that was sent to them from Ramon Navarro's contacts in the Medellin cartel wasn't supplying paste fast enough, so they were actually flying bales of leaves up from Peru.
So Ollie North set these 5 camps up 500 kilos per week. How many years were they in service?
They were in service when I got there, and they were setting up new ones, too. 159th Aviation Battalion out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Super Chinooks were flying in the fuel pods and equipment, dropping them bladders of acetone and jet fuel into the areas.
Well, where was North physically located at this time? Washington, D.C., or down there in Central and South America?
He was in Washington, D.C., but he did make several trips into South America, as did Vice President Bush, which wasn't brought out at the time. Mr. Bush was there on April 12th, but no one heard that.
Down at these camps?
That's correct.
April 12th of what year?
1985.
And he was Vice President then, wasn't he?
That's correct.
And how did the money flow or the organizational structure of the drugs, the money, et cetera? Do you have any idea on that?
I was a pilot down there. I don't know how the money flowed. I know many of the drugs went to either Ilopango Air Base in El Salvador, or they went up to Panama. I did have the occasion to fly several members to El Acatal to a meeting of this cartel. I call it the Olympic cartel because of the proportions of what they were doing. Several of the members that I flew to this meeting in El Acatal, here are the people who were there. It was General Noriega, Mike Harari, who was a retired Mossad agent assigned to General Noriega, Felix Rodriguez, Joe Fernandez, who was the CIA station chief in Costa Rica, General Gustavo Alvarez, who was the U.S. or the Honduran Army Chief of Staff, and a guy named William Barr, who represented the assets of this enterprise.
Now, wait a minute. William Barr used to be Attorney General of the United States.
He later became, under his boss, George Bush, the Attorney General of the United States. That's correct.
That's right. He replaced Thornburg, wasn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
Well, isn't that interesting? Well, you know, let me tell you about William Barr. Very briefly.